Alrighty, folks. So today I have the pleasure of being joined by Lynette Zang, Chief Market Analyst at ITM Trading. Lynette's internationally renowned and respected, not only as a market analyst, but a macroeconomist and many other things as well. And Lynette has a tremendously successful and helpful YouTube channel in ITM Trading. So I'll link various videos that Lynette has in the description below. But first of all, Lynette, thanks so much for coming on the show. How are you?
I'm great, Luke, and I'm really, really happy to be here today. So thank you for having me.
No, you're most welcome. It's great to have you. So, Lynette, I'm going to throw you in a few different directions here, I suppose, to a typical kind of macroeconomics type podcast interview that you're probably more used to. So my channel's, it's a bit of a mix, really. It's about faith, finance, freedom and free markets, really. And I suppose to this point, I've really just focused on the faith side of things and finance as well. So need to head more down the freedom and the importance of free markets, in time, but, we'll get there. But I kind of want to just start interestingly, whenever I scheduled with Jacqueline, and thanks very much, by the way, Jacqueline, with helping them organize this. But this is about a month ago now. We organized this meeting. I never for a moment thought they would have any sort of discussion relating to faith, but I just noticed that you had a video there with Claudio Mergen and his Spiritually Inspired series. And just two things that you mentioned, I just found it quite interesting and thought maybe we could just kick things off with this. You mentioned that throughout your life, you've allowed yourself to be guided by, well, I suppose, like, I'm Catholic, so I regard it as the Holy Spirit, but effectively some sort of spiritual presence in your life. And additionally, you mentioned that, you always, from a very, very young age, had this kind of understanding and awareness that you had to fulfill a certain purpose in your life. So yeah, I just thought that was really fascinating. And it's obviously, for listeners of yours that mightn't necessarily know, hear you discussing this sort of thing much, I just thought it was really interesting for me to hear. Would you like to just elaborate a bit on your kind of the importance of spirituality or faith in your life?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I would.
I told you I was
First of
going to
all,
point you in different directions here.
but I like that. It's a lot more fun.
Yeah.
But I will say, I don't know whether it's that I allowed myself to be guided. I don't know that I ever really had a choice, to be perfectly honest with you, because it did start when I was really young. And I think that I didn't know what I was being guided to, other than I was supposed to do something. I mean, I've always known I was supposed to do something that had a positive impact on a lot of people. And I really did spend my life seeking what that was. And I would be guided to do this, or I would be guided to do that. And I'd go, well, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this, but I don't really know why. And I will say that when it was time for me to learn why, that was the biggest crash and burn of my life from something I was guided to do. But I think that we all make this assumption of what that is. And to me, or for me, that was my arrogance. That was my youth speaking without experience. And so I needed to be humbled so that my eyes could be opened. And I know one day actually, I gave up. If I'm going to be honest about it, before I went to ITM Trading, I just said to myself, I don't think that what I was looking for, I mean, maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it wasn't. And then one day, I had the strategy that I had been guided to do as a stockbroker, and then came across non-dollar denominated bonds, which are all about currencies. I mean, with hindsight, you can see the path. But when you're in the middle of it, it's harder to see the path that you're on. And everybody at the office kept asking me for what I was doing that was so different than everybody else. And I tried to teach them, but it kind of went in one ear and out the other, because I put in the sweat equity, right? And so I'm like, you have to put in this sweat equity. And one of the consultants came up to me, it was a Friday afternoon, and said, just write it down. Just write it down. That's my due diligence. And it really, pardon me, pissed me off that I'm spending years and years immersed in this, and now this person just wants me to write it down and hand it to her. But I said something, fine. And the next morning I woke up and I said, like 4 o'clock in the morning, because I'm an early riser, and I started to write. And all of a sudden I was obsessed and I couldn't stop writing. And I think I wrote that day until like 11 o'clock at night. And my eyes were burning. I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and I started to write again. And I have a policy because I know that I work a lot. And so when my children say, we want to spend time with you, my initial reaction is always, I don't have time. But what comes out of my mouth is I take 3 deep breaths and then I just say yes. So because having a relationship with them is more important to me than anything. And so we were scheduled to have lunch that day. And I was really kind of annoyed because I really wanted to just keep writing. But I forced myself to stop. And as I was sitting at my dressing table, getting ready for this, what came to me, what I was kind of told, was this is what we've been preparing you for. And that's when I knew that I was fulfilling my purpose. And I was probably, by the time I really saw that, how old was I? I was probably 50 something at that point. So I went my whole life looking for it, not really understanding what it was. But when you have that hindsight and you look back on, I started with my uncle who was intangibles and gold. And I learned a lot from him, how those things move and the value and the value and the ways of holding it in the most private way. And then I was in banking, and then I was studying business finance, and then I was back in banking, and then I was a stockbroker. And, all of these things and all of the lessons that you learn, you don't necessarily understand all of it, but I'm very grateful that I've lived such a guided life, and that the universe helped me be clear that I have a purpose, and then what that purpose is. And I'm sure they have more in store for me, and I promise to show up and do the work. I mean, that's really what it is. That's the only thing I can control, is I show up and I do the work, and I stay open to whatever it is that I'm supposed to do, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm here today.
Absolutely. I suppose it's about being willing to be eclectic then at the same time, and just, you've obviously had such a broad range of experiences throughout your life. I think it was Steve Jobs mentioned that he once took a calligraphy class in university, and as a result of that really random class, that's actually what ended up becoming like the Apple logo. So you don't actually necessarily know what all these small little experiences, when they'll kind of like come back to you down the line.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'll swing you in a completely different direction now. So you don't have books that I can see on your office desk now, but I remember, I think about 2 years ago or something, I noticed you had a book, The Fruits of Graft by Wayne Jett, was sitting on your desk. And just coincidentally, because whenever I first listened to Wayne Jett having an interview with Sarah Westall, I think it was, who sadly in the times that we're in now, their channel no longer exists on YouTube because it was taken down. And you can't even see those discussions anymore. But when I saw the two of them having a podcast series, and I subsequently got his book, that for me was my red pill moment, I suppose, for want of a better term, in terms of understanding many of the layers in which there's just such an insidious financial system going on, but has been going on for a very long time. I think specifically he was talking about the specific steps which FDR took in the, around 1930, early 30s, which in his view led to just a large market crash actually becoming a Great Depression, and then different actions which he took, which extended it, lengthened it, deepened it, and ultimately led to Germany not being able to pay war reparations, which ultimately led to hyperinflation and then World War II. So, I was just wondering, first of all, in relation to that book, was there any specific moment for you where you had a red pill moment, understanding just how manipulated these markets are and the whole political systems of the world are, or was it kind of like a gradual thing for you?
No, I actually, when I became a stockbroker, that's when I started to see and understand this. Because I went to Shearson because at the time they had the best training program on the street. But they didn't teach me how to read the technical language of the markets or how to understand any of that. What they taught me was how to sell an intangible, which is invaluable. I mean, I'm very grateful for Shearson and for that education. But when they say, okay, well, you don't have to know any of this because we're just going to tell you. And people are coming to you because it's Shearson and they trust Shearson. And then when things collapse and what you hear is, well, people are here because of you. So now talk to them, keep them here. And remember too, I became a stockbroker in the 80s. And that was really the start of globalization. And so hearing the discussions on it and thinking, well, I don't know how great this is going to be for our country. And then watching the jobs go overseas and the corporations benefit from the cheaper labor. So, and then really on top of that, looking at currencies and seeing patterns, seeing repeatable patterns and realizing that everything has a life cycle, currencies included, have a life cycle. And just like, my life cycle where I'm at 66 is very different than where my granddaughter is at 6, right? And the same thing is true for currencies. You can see this obvious pattern once you understand what you're looking at. And that enables you to get into the proper position to survive it and even thrive from it. And this is what the central bankers know. So I would say that, looking, and I love history, and I'm an artist, so that's probably why I really see, the patterns in it. But that was really my being a stockbroker, frankly, and living through Black Monday on 1987, and seeing the plunge protect. I mean, just watching all of the manipulation from an insider's point of view helped me really. That was my red pill. That was my red pill.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Sticking with that book, The Fruits of Graft, just like you mightn't even have an opinion on this, but it's just one thing which I mentioned to. I had Steve Van Meter on the show. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Steve a couple of months ago, and I kind of wanted every time I'm speaking with someone who's in this community, I kind of want to bring up this point, especially with yourself, because between yourself and the different people that you'll be discussing things with, you actually have probably a lot more influence than you might realize, and you probably will more in time. But um, Wayne Jett discussed Henry George's idea of land tax.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment in particular, whenever there's obviously a move towards, let's say, increased taxation throughout not just the United States, because
This is global.
yeah, it's all global now,
Mhm.
and kind of for countries like Ireland here, there's a cascading effect from whatever happens in America, kind of just like dominoes happens slightly later with us. But so obviously Biden, the administration there, is pushing for more taxation now, and that's going to happen increasingly now all around the world. And on a percentage basis, that's going to hit ordinary working people, be they kind of working class or middle class, more than anyone else, on a percentage basis anyway. And then you see scenarios now where Bill Gates has now just become the #1 agricultural land owner in the United States. Bezos is chasing him down, and there's no direct taxation that's hitting these guys for doing this. And obviously Henry George suggested through his land tax that, well, he was effectively suggesting that there would just be one tax. You could eliminate all other taxes, but the one tax would be imposed would be on the unimproved value of land. So just quick background on it. Effectively, if you have two neighbors with two plots of land and one just has unimproved land just sitting there like a field and the other person has a massive tower, they're both charged the same because it's just the unimproved value of land, and that thereby kind of puts an incentive on you making your land as productive as possible, thereby penalizing anyone that's kind of hoarding large amounts of land without really utilizing it. So I think that, you know, when we're heading in this increasingly unequal, unfair kind of direction, where those with the most, kind of the Matthew principle, where to he who has more will be given type thing. I think it would just kind of level the playing field a bit if we, but I think people need to understand that this type of taxation exists and this, you know, theory exists. I think Milton Friedman was a massive advocate of it. A gentleman who, Johan Norberg, who has taken over Milton Friedman's duties, let's say, on the Free to Choose network. I was speaking with him a couple of months ago, and he was a big advocate for land tax. I think Albert Einstein as well in the past said it was like the least bad tax ever proposed. And apparently those on the right and those on the left can both get behind it. So I just wondered, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, okay. All taxes definitely impact those that make less money, and the monetary system itself is designed to tax those that don't make as much at a much heavier rate, whether it's for land or, frankly, it's for anything else. Do I think you can take care? You know, here's the thing. Do you like paying taxes? Now, if you felt your taxes were actually going to something that was beneficial, you probably wouldn't care. I wouldn't care. But when you're looking at the land taxes or any taxes, so much of that money is wasted because it's so easy to spend other people's money. And what I know is that during the Great Depression, you could have had your house or your property paid off in full, but if you did not pay your taxes, then you lost the property. And so when I'm looking at land taxes and looking at what happens to them, which has already started here. I mean, we had an increase of, I think, 4%, which is the highest level percentage-wise since the mid-90s on the land taxes, on property taxes. Then you can see the writing on the wall, because land is immovable property, right? You can't put that property on your back and take it. And so governments utilize that, and they've been saying we have not been using this enough. So when you're looking at land tax, it actually makes me quite nervous, because I see historically what happens to property taxes during hyperinflationary and reset events, which is what we are going through. So, you know, I think the whole system needs a complete overhaul. And I think there needs to be much better checks and balances, because it's so easy to spend other people's money.
Yeah.
And the deficits and all of that. You know, do people really think that there's no consequences to the level of and the burden of the debt that federal, state, municipal governments, individuals, corporations, people really think that there's no consequence to all of this debt? The land tax, whether it's property taxes, sales, or however, I mean, you know, we are taxed to death. When you buy something, I mean, this is like, I don't know, quadrillion taxation. So I think there are more fair ways to do it, but aside from that, I think it needs a big overhaul, and then a whole lot more accountability. And maybe we will get this in the reset, maybe we won't, but I'm going to tell you, you need to be able to pay your land taxes. Bill Gates will not have a problem doing that. People, you know, that don't make as much money, upper class, middle, I mean, it depends on where you're holding your wealth too. If you're holding your wealth in intangibles that are easy to confiscate, oh, the market goes down, what are you going to do? Nothing, right? There's nothing you can do. If that's where you're holding your wealth, then even the wealthy are going to have problems meeting their taxes down the road when we're in that hyperinflationary event. That's why gold and silver outside of the system, real money, is so critical because, well, anything can happen on a short-term manipulated basis. It's easy peasy and cheap. On a longer-term basis, you need to have particularly gold to be able to always pay that land tax and also to be able to cover your mortgage.
Yeah.
Those are the two big threats to real estate. Is that going to be a problem for Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates? No.
Yeah.
Is that going to be a problem for, well, it's not going to be a problem for me either because I have the gold to cover that regardless of what happens. But for most people that don't realize that this is really a monetary reset, then that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. I think the idea behind that land tax proposal was that it would be, if used, they were suggesting it would be as a replacement for all other taxes, as opposed to kind of the addition that it's being, used as now. Because I don't know specifically the way it is in the States, but like, here, income tax, as soon as you earn something like more than £40,000 as an employee, you're looking at 40%. Plus every item that you buy is 20% value added tax. Plus there's capital gains if you have the audacity to try and invest what little disposable income you have left. Corporation tax, something like 19%. We have national insurance contributions, which are just a fancy way of saying health service tax. And, it's impossible for the ordinary person, effectively, just as an employee anyway, to expect to have any disposable income at the end of the day. I think even if you buy a house now, there's stamp duty tax, which is just a nothing tax effectively on buying a house of like 5%. So, and people are suggesting that we need more of this,
Exactly.
I think that people don't understand, and that's why it's great having these different channels that discuss the importance of free markets. Capitalism in general gets an awful name because that's just clever marketing in effect over the last couple of generations. But really, it's a mechanism. Free markets are a mechanism for ordinary people to kind of plow their own way through difficult kind of financial challenges. And if you don't have that kind of opportunity, I think it's, in a world where we're pushing more social, who was it said? Someone I was listening to the other day said, I think it was Jordan Peterson was talking about, I don't know, if you've said something like, in capitalism, you have a chance, in socialism, you have no chance, or something like that. But effectively, that's the idea.
Do you really think that we're inside of a capitalist system?
No, we're not, because we're over 50% taxes across the board. So that's at least 50% socialistic. That's just...
But I'm going to take it even more extreme than that. This is fascist because it's the corporations that are doing the dictating, right? And corporations are more important than the individuals. So it would be lovely, and it is actually my fondest wish, that what's happening gets burned off during the reset.
Yeah.
But if the same people remain in power, so what? If they get rid of all of these taxes and they go to one land tax, do you think that's where it's going to stop? I mean, what did the VAT come in at when it first came in? Was it, I don't know what it was in Ireland, but I think it was something like 5 or 6%, and now you're up to 20%,
Yeah.
right? So when you stop and you look at it, and I want to point something else out that is not really visible but is critically important. The whole fiat money system, so the government-based money system, it by design is designed around inflation. So you want to talk about the normal person trying to get ahead? I mean, you are cut off at the knees because your income will never keep pace with inflation. But corporations do, and those that are running those corporations do, because what's inflation gauged on but their products and their services, right? And that's really what's enabled that vast wealth and income inequality. And the genius of this fiat money system is how they intentionally create the inflation, and then they tax it. So, I mean, it's disgusting to me. On a gold standard, they can't get away with it because there are limitations and restrictions. But now we've got all this financial engineering. This is all by design. So you think about, oh, well, in the inflated economy that we're in right now, and you look at, since we're talking about real estate, look at what's happening to property prices globally, right? They're being inflated up because of all of this excess money and the low rates to enable you to take on more debt, which is why rates cannot go, well, they will go up at some point in here, but they're going to have to keep those artificially subdued. But the genius of being able to create that inflation and then tax that inflation, even on your wages, on everything, on the goods and the services. I mean, it's evil genius. But how in the world? The only way, this is my opinion, the only way that I think that the average person can get ahead is if they accumulate physical gold and physical silver, because it's the only asset class that is severely undervalued. It's cheap, cheap, cheap. Because a rising gold price is an indication of a failing fiat currency and a failing system. You can see the stock market go up, but at the same time that that stock market is going up, the purchasing power value, which is really what matters to us, continues to go down until we get not just zero, but listen to the talk and watch what's happening. Negative purchasing power value. It's what negative rates are. It attacks your principal. They've already taken away all your purchasing power. Now they're taking your principal as well. It's disgusting. It's disgusting.
Sticking, I suppose, then we'll look at gold and silver now. One of my friends just coincidentally messaged me today, just said he had some money on the sidelines to invest type thing, and he wanted to know if I had any suggestions, you know. And I was basically telling him that just in terms of short term, there was pretty much, like, if you had asked me a few months ago, I could have potentially suggested different things in relation to cryptocurrency or shares, just in terms of things which I regarded as being undervalued short term. And I understand, this is the thing, like, I understand that gold and silver are undervalued in real terms. However, I see a scenario, just in terms of like different technical analysis that I've done and followed with different traders the last few years and things like this. I see a scenario playing out where, if and when this crash comes, there'll be such a kind of rush towards dollars and cash more than anything that short term, the spot value at least of gold and silver will probably temporarily take a dip with everything else. But I suppose this is a good time to ask you, because I've heard you mention it before, and it's one thing that I've never really got my head around. The manipulation of the gold and silver price. How are you able to explain for us, sort of just in sort of simple terms, how it is that they're able to suppress and manipulate those prices?
Sure. I mean, that's actually really easy because the mechanism that they created the spot market in the early 70s because they knew that once they allowed the public to own gold again, it was still very close in our thought process of gold as money. They didn't want you to do that. So they opened it, they created the spot market at that point so that they could control the price. Now, spot market is a contract. You can create as many contracts as you want, whereas physical gold and physical silver, or anything physical, doesn't matter what it is, there's a finite amount of it. So that's how they manipulate it, is they just create lots and lots of contracts, make it very, very cheap to buy and sell it. And before the Bank for International Settlements, which is a central bank, changed how they accounted for all of those contracts, derivative contracts on gold. I saw it with my own eyes, but it was before I knew how to do print screen, unfortunately. But they showed that there were 62,000 ounces of physical, of contract gold. So gold that does not nor ever will exist for every 1 ounce of physical. So, hey, that's pretty easy to manipulate the price down, isn't it?
Mhm.
So
So
that's how they do it. They just use contracts and they can create an unlimited amount of them.
yeah, so the general recommendation then is to buy gold, but gold or silver, or do you have a preference, by the way, in terms of current prices and things like that, or?
Well, not in terms of current prices, because I probably think differently about money than maybe not everybody that you're talking to,
Just
but
the ratio
certainly
then,
in
or?
general. It's not really a ratio either. What I look at is functionality. What is it that I am trying to accomplish? So, for example, part of the strategy that's just based on those repeatable patterns is enabling you to sustain your current standard of living. And therefore, I need something that's barterable. And you made a comment earlier about the first rush would be to cash, right? Because that's what people have grown more comfortable and familiar with. And so your cash is your very first line of defense until either the hyperinflation or hyper deflation, either way, it's the same coin, just the opposite side of it. Once that kicks in and people then recognize the loss in value, because the only difference between inflation and hyperinflation is the speed. So hyper is speed, right? Then once people recognize that, well, if they don't have a choice, then they're just, pardon me, really screwed.
Mhm.
But if you have your silver over here, even anything that's marked sterling is 92.5% pure. So you can cut it up if you need to, or you can have dimes, quarters, half dollars, dollars, different sizes of silver. So for me, it's about functionality. If I need to go to the grocery store or the gas station, okay. Silver for me is day-to-day barterability. So in the strategy to determine how much of that you need, you look at what your current standard of living costs you. And, everybody has different goals and different means and all of that. Personally, I think it's going to take maybe 10 years to walk through this whole mess. So I make, based upon my current cost of living, which for me also includes my children's current cost of living, I make sure that I have enough silver, barterable silver, to walk me through that. Beyond that, I don't really feel like I need silver. I mean, I have a substantial amount, but I don't really feel like I need more. So without a doubt, since gold is the primary currency metal, and since that is how a government and a central bank ultimately perform the reset, they revalue the fiat money that has no intrinsic value against gold money. That's why they're all accumulating it. Well, not all, but that's why most central banks have been accumulating it. They revalue the currency against gold. Then during these hyperinflationary events, gold, it holds its value better than silver. Even though we'll see the ratio close, that gold silver ratio close for a while, when we really get into the throes of it, then gold just holds its value much better. And you can hold a lot more wealth in a little tiny package. And the function of that is then to convert into income producing assets, which right now, since we were talking about real estate is up here in valuation, gold is down here in valuation, but that's going to flip flop.
Yeah.
But the function of silver is for barterability. The function of gold is wealth preservation. So you make sure you can pay your property taxes. If you do have a stock or cryptocurrency account, that are denominated in dollars, that gold can protect that. So if those go down, that's going up. But also then it's opportunity positioning. Because if you can hold on to your purchasing power, then when these other income producing assets fall, then you can buy them when they're cheap. This is about wealth transfer. So you want to be in a position to have that wealth transfer your way. And that's what gold is for me. So,
and it's really important then, I suppose, for people to, so the main things are one, gold and silver, a combination of both.
you need both.
Probably
Yeah.
probably a percentage allocation. You'd be looking at a larger percentage going towards gold. So I don't know.
Oh, in my personal portfolio, oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
huge.
yeah, and then also it has to be physical. It has to be physical. But have you any kind
100%.
of I know that, so I know that UK wise anyway, it's just an unusual one, but if you have Britannia coins, they're actually exempt from capital gains if you make any gains on them as a result of it's legal tender. It's actually it's a weird loophole where it's legal tender. So if you're going to purchase physical gold or physical silver, you may as well do it in terms of the coins of Britannia's. But have you any other like preference for bullion bars or coins or any
I sure
rationale?
do. Yeah, I sure do.
Yeah.
Now, you have to understand my background is with my Uncle Al. And
Yeah.
he was, he was a major antique dealer back east. And so this was 1965, and I was at his house with my parents, and he said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And he had two tall floor safes. And when he said to my parents, "If anything should happen to me, Aunt Bertie will be well taken care of for the rest of her life because of what's in these safes."
Mm-hmm.
And when I turned around, you could not fit one more pre-1933 gold coins in there.
Oh, wow.
My guess is, knowing what I know now, I'd say at least 3 monster boxes. So between the two safes, he had at least 3,000 ounces of gold when it was illegal in this country to hold more than 5 ounces of gold.
For 40
So,
years. Is that right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah. So, and even near-term history in India in 2016, when they demonetized 85% of their currency, they did go door to door and confiscate gold. And that's according to the head of their finance ministry. Not me, them. So I'm data gal.
Yeah.
I don't make it up. Here's the link. So my personal preference, I do not. This has not always been true in the trend cycle, but for where we are right now, I personally do not buy any new coins because I think there will be an overt confiscation. And I always look at everything, what if I'm right and what if I'm wrong? And if I can do something that really doesn't matter whether or not I'm right or wrong, rock and roll hoochie coo. That's what I'm going to do. If it costs me a little bit more, that's my wealth insurance. I don't really care because I am so clear on how undervalued this asset is. And I'm not waiting for Wall Street to recognize it because Wall Street's just a mechanism for the central banks to keep it suppressed. It is because that is how, only one way, that's it. So it makes it easy. One way that they do a complete reset of the currency, and that's against gold. So that's when I anticipate gold expressing to its true fundamental value.
Yeah. Just in terms of, sorry, I don't want to get you to repeat, but so it's the newer coins, you'd be concerned that they could be confiscated, but older ones, like at what stage would the cutoff be and why in terms of like how old you would go for?
Okay. Well, the laws are going to vary from country to country.
Yeah.
So, I can speak to the U.S. I can't really speak
Yeah, sure.
as much to, Ireland. But I make it easy and I look at the retirement accounts. If I can hold it in a retirement, if I can hold that gold in a retirement account, that is easy to confiscate.
Okay.
So, I think if you look in that way all across the world, maybe that will give you an indication of what you might want to be holding versus what is more likely to come into the government radar. So that's why it's pre-33, but then in 61, President Kennedy, that he wanted to import a lot of foreign gold, so he created a loophole and allowed, pre-48, so sovereigns, early British sovereigns, Swiss francs. But you have to be careful with them because they did a lot of restrikes in 48, so it'd be a different date, an earlier date than that. But you could say in general pre-61, not because of the date on the coin, but when it was actually minted.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Like I knew the idea of getting bullion, and I knew the idea of keeping it close to home and things like this, but I didn't really ever know that, um, yeah, the more recent stuff mightn't necessarily be something that you can keep. So
Well, let
every
me
day's a
kind of
school day,
throw,
Lynette.
totally, even for me. But let me throw this out there and just kind of think about this for a minute. If you could purchase the health and retirement program that the government employees have
Hmm.
versus the one that the government gives you, which one is better, right? So when I look at, say, a 1 ounce gold coin that goes for $8.5 million, I have to say to myself, who can afford that?
Hmm.
The guys that either write the laws or would have the ability to influence those that write the laws. And when they do that, whose best interest do they write them in? So I'm looking to be in that category. Now, I can't spend $8 million on one coin, but I can spend a couple thousand and be in that same category.
Yeah.
And that's the category that I want to be in because I am more likely to be able to hold on to my gold. And that's why, I think an easy way is to look at, well, what can you hold inside of an IRA or a retirement plan? And what can't you hold in there? Well, if you can't hold it in there, that's probably the kind you want to buy.
In terms of just that you mentioned kind of retirement plans, I actually just did a video, like, I'm only 29, there's very little in it type thing, but I just made a video. I'm going to start a series called Man versus Pension Plan, because one thing that I'm kind of, well, obviously concerned with, is the fact there's just going to be an absolute pension disaster for
Of course.
everyone once there's going to be a financial collapse. So what I did is, it's a SIP, it's a self-invested personal pension. I just withdrew the kind of pension fund that I had, which for me is just a scam in itself. The pension funds, the way they are. I mean, I don't know your thoughts on this, but I didn't really know until I did a kind of deep dive into what mine was comprised of. But it was something along the lines of 60% in equities, 15% bonds, 15% commodities. But even within those, like the amount of the share, there were maybe 100 different shares in the equities. Break down the bonds. It was just, you've short-term bonds, you've medium-term bonds, you've international bonds, you know, there's such a diversification there that you're definitely never going to make any money.
Well,
Diversification
it
is
kind
probably
of
one of
looks, yeah, it kind of looks like diversification, but in reality, the only thing you can convert that into is the currency, the fiat currency. It's not
well,
diversified. It just
yeah,
appears diversified.
yeah. But there's also, there's such an inability to. I remember looking into this. I don't know exactly what it was, but in the UK anyway, if you wanted to withdraw your pension plan, the portfolio, before the age of 55, as a result of all the numerous taxes and fees that there were, effectively, you actually cleared, not even joking, 15% of your overall
Mhm.
portfolio. It was literally ludicrous how much it was. So I don't, it's a ticking time bomb. It's such a ticking time bomb. But is there anything that you see as a potential way around, or way of protecting yourself within that pension plan? Like, is there anything, or not
Well,
really?
look, you have to understand that these pensions, and they call them schemes.
Hmm.
So I think, you can, those are their words. So, okay. And they are a scheme. And they're a scheme because all of the fees inside of all of that garbage are basically hidden.
Yeah.
So who's really making the money on it? Then, if you listen and you read the documents when they're creating these products, governments, central banks, whatever, they want those fees to be big enough that you'll go, you'll look at it and it says, oh, you have $100,000 or 100,000 euros. But then if you take it all out, you've got 15,000 euros. No, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to pay the taxes. I don't want to pay the fees.
Yeah.
So inside of there, I would say no, even though you can do a gold IRA in this country, you could probably do that there as well. That's the kind of gold that is easy to confiscate. It's outside that you can protect it with your gold.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, gold is wealth insurance. That's really what gold is, and purchasing power insurance. That's what gold really is. Yeah. So, but it has to be, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. I mean, people, it doesn't matter what you perceive. That's irrelevant. In a court of law, it's not good, but I didn't know. Doesn't matter. It's your job to know this. So those schemes are set up to benefit the creators of those schemes, not to benefit the participants, but that's how it's sold.
Yeah. Whenever you're
and
saying
you are not diverse, I just have to, I'm sorry, I just have to make this point one more time. You are not diversified if everything you hold is in intangibles. You are not diversified. If you have 1,000 stocks, you are not diversified. If you have stocks, bonds, REITs, annuities, you are not diversified. You have to have tangibles in order to be properly diversified.
So just in terms of what you're saying, if you don't own it, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. What are your thoughts on cryptocurrency?
Well, I know that's the direction that they're nudging us in, and I've really been watching Bitcoin since it came out in 2009. And I certainly read the NSA paper about cryptocurrencies and how to create that from the NSA in 1996, and then the subsequent peer review paper that was done on smart contracts in, I think it was 1997 or 1998. So, I think that going to programmable money is I know that's where we're headed, but it is extremely dangerous because the individual will be 100% controlled by the central bankers. Right now, it takes 18 months when they create policy. And remember, they don't create policy and want you to understand that it's their policy. They deliver it through the banks. They deliver it through the retail public. They want distance between their policy and how you perceive it being implemented. So the way that I feel about it is that once we go to that system, if all of your money is tied up into either central bank digital currencies or some kind of cryptocurrency, that is easily traced, tracked, controlled, because it's programmable money. So we're going in that direction, but where I would have converted a larger percentage of my gold and silver holdings back into the new currency, I am not. I mean, I will convert some, but I'm going to be converting my gold and silver as I need it, not day to day, but probably month to month or quarter to quarter, something like that, because I don't want them to have that level of control.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose that privacy.
Yeah.
I'm older than you. We're used to privacy in my age group. Your age group is used to giving up your privacy really easily.
I'm not.
May not.
Some of us aren't. Some of us are interested in these things because we're not. But yeah, I know.
I'm glad. That's what.
But that's the importance of passing
really what
on.
Gives me hope.
Yeah, but that's the importance of understanding freedom and the need for freedom. And people just think that's, especially in younger generations, people just think that's a term that comes from movies. Everyone's seen Braveheart and they're like, oh, you just think you're some you wannabe hero type thing. It's like, no, you don't understand how bad your life's going to get if this tyranny continues kind of, and we're just acquiescing more and more each and every week, it seems, to more restrictions and curtailments on our freedoms. But just on that, I suppose.
But it's sold as convenient, right?
Yeah.
It's sold as convenient. I mean, it is a whole lot more convenient. You have your phone with you all the time. What do you want to carry a checkbook? What do you want to carry cash? What do you want to, here, everything is on your phone right there. How convenient is that?
Yeah.
But freedom is not convenient. You know my mantra: food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter.
Yeah.
These are the things that we all need to have a reasonable standard of living. So we need to be as independent and self-sufficient as possible going through this, or you're going to lose all your choices. Look at China. China is showing the rest of the world how to control a population really easily. Look at what happened in Hong Kong, where you had all of these, protests for democracy and how convenient this pandemic is. And now all of a sudden, Hong Kong's done.
Yeah.
Done. Democracy, done.
Do you want to hear it?
And I think that's disease.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a crazy one? So,
Sure.
Ireland, probably the most religious country in Europe, more or less, for the last, until about 20, 30 years ago. We're now, I'm technically in Northern Ireland, but in Ireland anyway, we're the only country in Europe that is currently you're not allowed to go to church, for any denomination. You're not allowed to go, and it's now a criminal offence to go, or for the priests to say mass or anything like that. But there was a guy about a week ago. They were in mass in a place here called Athlone, and he took a video of the guards, the police, basically coming in and shutting down the mass, and he was just sitting with his son, and he was just questioning the guards effectively. And 2 nights ago, they arrested him at 3 a.m. in the morning and sectioned him under the Mental Health Act, saying that they had reason to believe that he wasn't, suitable. It wasn't suitable for his kids to be with him. So they were taken from him, and he hasn't been able to get them back. Now, there's been a lot of different good political parties who've kind of rallied to the cause, but only smaller, more local parties that don't actually have much influence on the national stage. And it's crazy. Like, it's pure tyranny. There are so many parallels with the Third Reich that it's not even funny, and
Exactly.
this is what's happening. But it's not just here, it's not just where you are, it's everywhere. And like, people just kind of,
Everywhere.
they're scared. There's so many people are scared to kind of even in conversations say that there's something wrong here. It's strange how this, it's for the greater good, these kind of little catchy slogans just keep getting
But the greater good only is for like the few people at the top. It is false.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
On that as well, these acronyms, these super governmental, international, unelected private entities, which masquerade as public service entities, World Economic Forum,
The IMF,
WHO, whatever. What are your, like,
yeah.
Well, I suppose there's no real need to say, well, what are your thoughts on this? But are there any do you have any hope in terms of solutions, or,
Yes, I do.
optimism for the future, against
Yes,
these
I
guys?
do. Yes, I do, because we've been witnessing, really, especially since 2008, we've been witnessing the public starting to rise up, the rise of populism.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the pandemic squelched a lot of those. I mean, it enabled the governments to go in, and that's how I feel about that. But yes, I do have a lot of hope, because if we can get 3% of the population to understand what's happening, then maybe we can have some choices on the other side of this mess that we're already I mean, this isn't something that's going to happen in the future. This is something that is happening right at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And, we vote with our pocketbook. So if you're blinded by the manipulations with all of the money injection of the markets going up, and you hold your wealth in there, and that's where you hold all of your wealth, then you're going to lose all of your freedoms. But if enough of us say no, because there's more of us than there are them, and if enough of us say no, we want a fair system, and we're willing to fight for that by pulling our wealth out of the system they created to benefit themselves. Yes, I have a lot of hope.
Yeah.
And if what And if it doesn't happen on I hate to say this, but it's true. If it doesn't happen on a broad enough scale, then quite honestly, I've prepared for my family to continue to have choices.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I want to see everybody have choices.
Hmm.
But that's what the gold and silver is for me,
Yeah.
because it's real money. And you look at what the central bankers are doing globally, not every country, but many of them, they're accumulating gold because they know darn well that they are absolutely 100% destroying the fiat money. But they also know that people cannot conceive of that. They marry the legal money of the state, quote on end quote.
Yeah.
So, yes, I do have hope. That's my battle. If I didn't have any hope, why would I be on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would
Yeah.
just be quietly accumulating, right? And saying, too bad for you.
Yeah.
No, I have a lot of hope. And you give me hope. Your generation, you're the ones that are going to either create this revolution or not. I'm in the last third of my life. Our generation isn't going to create this revolution. Yours is. So yes, I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope.
Yeah. So do I, but it's just a problem that like, or something that would concern me is just that unless you know, for example, that you need to be starting to accumulate old physical precious metals, it seems that it just seems that the way everything's been orchestrated, 95+% of the population who are lucky enough to live in their own home, in all likelihood, have a 90% mortgage or something like that. So if there is a scenario where there's a massive house market crash, everyone's then suddenly at the whims and mercy of the government. Then if you do, if you have been a good little saver, and you have your money in your bank, and say these banks go under, except for maybe one or two massive banks that become one central bank potentially in each nation, or if you've cryptocurrency, which is somehow confiscated, or if you've done really well and you do have physical gold and silver, but because you've got the newer kind, it's also confiscated. I'm optimistic in terms of people awakening, but in terms of you need to be woke, to use that term, but you also then need to have protected yourself adequately. And that's the thing that I just don't know if enough people, one, know about it, two, know enough about it to make sure that they're properly secured, and then three, have actually done it. Because there's one thing knowing these things, it's an altogether different thing actually taking the action. So there is a challenge there, but I suppose that's why it's just
Right.
good to have more of these sorts of conversations.
Well, it
Uh,
is, and that's the importance of community, right? That's
yeah,
why it's so important. You say independence because you want to be as self-sufficient and as independent as possible, but when you get involved in the right community, that can help everybody be independent and self-sufficient. It can be overwhelming to, well, I mean, I've been getting ready for this since I bought this property in 2010 and converted it into an urban farm because I know that food is and water are the two biggest issues for people during these transitions.
yeah,
So it can be overwhelming. However, if you can find a community of like-minded people, but they have different skill sets, then you can come together and still be independent. So that is a big goal of mine personally. And, that's what I've been able to do in my little neighborhood. That's why I'm on your show right now, on a broader scale. But it is to encourage people to find and create those communities. And the internet enables people from different parts of the world to come together in community and help each other.
yeah,
So there's a local community and there's a more international community, but I think if you start seeking it, you'll ultimately find it.
yeah,
So start seeking that and start to. The other part is, for me, the way that I did it. Now I started a while ago, but I looked at my mantra: food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. And I said to myself, okay, where do I feel the most vulnerable?
yeah,
And then I started to fill that hole. Didn't mean I have to do everything in there, but I did a piece of where I felt most vulnerable. And then I'd step back and I'd say, okay, where do I feel most vulnerable? And I'd go and I'd do something in that piece that would help me not feel that vulnerable. So that is something that I encourage. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And getting prepared is a very large elephant, especially like I knew nothing about gardening. Well, that's not entirely true because I had two sisters that were master gardeners. Neither one of them were particularly helpful to me. So I had to learn a lot. But, but you just start, do something, start.
Yeah. So I suppose last point that I was going to ask earlier, but I kind of went in a tangent. You mentioned food and water. Just for ordinary people who might just think, what are you talking about? What's the kind of main, I suppose, concern that you would have in terms of, say, the food supply chain, or what are these problems with water, and what would be like the main recommendations?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you have the ability to grow your own food, start a garden. Maybe even start a community garden, or maybe there are community gardens where you can go and volunteer, but start a garden. If you don't have the ability to do that, maybe you live in the middle of a city and, you just can't really do that, but you can do things like aquaponics or aquaponics where you grow up. So it takes just a little bit of space to grow fresh food, or you can buy food that has a long shelf life, rice, beans, canned tomatoes, those kinds of things. Or you can also, or sprouting seeds. Broccoli is super nutritious. You can buy a few pounds of sprouting seeds, throw them in your freezer, and, when you need to use them, you rinse them off for 3 days, you have real food. Because I think we saw in March and April how broken the supply chain is. It's not fixed yet.
Yep.
And if you look at Venezuela, you have 90% of the population there that is in abject poverty. So you can't get your hands on food. Even if you had, if you had gold and silver, you could, because those 10%, they're doing quite well, actually. Their standard of living has not really changed. Their wealth base has been expanded because they've been able to hold their purchasing power. So, but I think we all experienced what happened back in March and April of last year. And, ask yourself, how did I feel about that? Where are the holes in my strategy? Because for me, I was able to help a lot of people. I had plenty of toilet paper that I could give away. I had plenty of food that I could give away. What I didn't have was a bug out house that I could escape to if it got really nasty.
Yeah.
So that is a hole that I had that I have now filled. So, look at where your holes are. What made you uncomfortable then? That's a great place to start.
Yeah.
But food is typically, you can't live without food or water. So, and food is typically the biggest issue for most people during these transitions. Just look at Venezuela.
So I suppose I've taken way more of your time than I thought I was going to. So last thing I'll just ask, is there anything you're particularly excited about or looking forward to for the remainder of 2021?
Let me tell you, I think for me personally, 2021 has been for many reasons, the single most interesting year. But I would say that we'll see universal basic income before the end of this year because it's already being rolled out. They're going to have to do something. It's a consumer-driven economy. The world is big consumers, so they're going to have to create money. Now, whether or not we will see, we may be seeing the hyperinflation once that kicks into gear and people feel confident that they're going to have income every month. And we're going into a boom time, which, by the way, is a big key when we're transitioning into a new financial and monetary system, the roaring 20s, the excessive 80s. So as we are shifting into a new system, we're going to have what looks like a boom so that they can make this transition. you do not realize it, and then you are in a really bad position. So get ready now, and don't be fooled by the perception management of the central banks and the governments to keep you docile, to keep you inside of the system that they are knowingly and intentionally destroying, because it won't be in your best interest.
I'll have to disagree with you on one thing. I don't think we're
You
going to
get
have.
to.
I don't think we're going to have a. I think the crash that we're kind of expecting is more imminent than you think, and I just say that because not on a time thing, but just on a targets thing. Just different Elliott wave theory and different trading analysis tools that have used and followed a couple of different traders have been looking at targets for the last few years. And the Nasdaq's literally just as this last couple of weeks hitting 14,000 has pretty much hit those targets. Same with the SQQQ kind of inverse ETF on that market. And the Dow Jones hasn't quite hit targets yet. I was thinking it was going to hit basically 40,000, and I think it's at like 34,000 now. So I think we're really in those last echelons. And I think that it also probably ties in, even if you just think of like mass psychology, pretty much everyone I know now is getting involved with investing, to some or other degree. And these are people who've never got involved with it before. So there may be some last bit of euphoria, but I think we're all but there, which is concerning. But that's exactly why we need to be taking these steps to properly secure ourselves for the future now. But yeah, Lynette, thanks so much for coming on. It was great to have a conversation with you, and yeah, many thanks for all the great work you do with your channel. I've learned so much from you, and many of my friends have as well. And
Good.
yeah,
Thank
so
you.
appreciate it.
I appreciate that too. And we'll see what happens, because they're revving up the printing presses, and all of this excess liquidity, the hyperinflation that they've created has gone into those assets that they have targeted to reflate. I mean, it was the reflation trade. So, I really do hope you're right, not because I want to see the market go down as much as I want to see people shaken awake.
Yeah.
Right? And we'll see. It's fascinating. We could not live in more interesting times, that's for sure.
I know.
But yeah.
Very last thing, just on your UBI point. There's actually, I've noticed a couple of cryptocurrencies which have been popping up, which are specifically related to UBI. So as you're saying, that they've targeted certain assets to kind of make them go through the roof. Wouldn't surprise me, so it mightn't be a bad shout to have some exposure to the UBI. But it's weird. I don't know. I find that a part of my soul feels like it's dying if you're to invest in something which you kind of disagree with on a fundamental level, even if you know it's going to do well. It's a weird thing.
Thank you. I'm right there with you. I
Yeah.
am 100%. Those are people say, well, why didn't you do this? And why did you? Because ethically, I
Yeah.
can't do it. Ethically, I can't. And look in the mirror. And, if I'm going to tell you to do something, it's because that's what I'm doing. And so it's extremely important to me. Ethics are everything. And I'm not going to say, well, you should do this, and then I turn around and do something else. I don't care that I miss those market gains. That doesn't matter to me one teeny weeny bit.
Yeah.
What matters to me is that I live my words. That's integrity to me. I live my words. So it looks like, yeah. So I don't care if it's going up. Let it go up. That's all manipulation to keep you inside of the system. That's not okay with me. So I don't own any of that stuff because I know what's happening to the money.
Yeah. Yeah. All righty, Lynette. Thank you, and God bless.
God bless you too. Bye-bye.